Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to my latest video. Um, it's been a while since I've been in front of the camera. I've actually got a new microphone now, so hopefully the sound quality will be a little better. That'd be cool. Yeah, so it's been a while since I've been in front of the camera. And it's been a while since, even longer, in fact, since I did a tag video. So I was looking around YouTube for one because I fancied doing one, and I found one on Indie Andy's channel. It's called the Disability Tag. It's an older tag, and I think it's 8 questions long. So yeah, I thought I would do that. It's worth checking out Indie Andy's version. I'll post it in the comments below for you to check that out. So I've got the questions here. So if you see me looking away at any point, that'll be why. So let's get going. Okay, question 1. Oh, this is a good one. What is the name of your disability? Well, I have 3 areas of disability. Like Indie Andy, I myself have ASD. I'm autistic. Of a Asperger's profile, particularly ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, whatever you want to call it. Aside from that, I suffer from clinical depression, and I also, and this is the big mystery one, have a yet undiagnosed physical disability. They have thought it was a couple of different things. HSP, which is hereditary spastic paraparesis. DRD, which is dopa-responsive dystonia. And I'll go into that a little more in the second question, possibly, about how it affects me more. And also SCA1, which is spinocerebellar ataxia, which can mimic certain forms of HSP. I've also been tested for more general dystonia and Parkinson's. And they've also considered cerebral palsy. So they've been through a lot. I've had a lot of testing, a lot of MRIs. I've had about 6 or 7 MRIs. I've had a couple of CT scans, quite a bit of electrical testing, blah, 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 but they still don't know what it is. I have further testing coming up in the new year in London at UCL, the National Hospital of Neurology and Neurosurgery, to give the hospital its proper title. And so we'll see what happens then. But yes, at present I have the ASD, clinical depression, and an undiagnosed, probably neurological, physical disability. They think it's probably myopathy, but we'll see. Some form of myopathy anyway. Okay, question 2. How does your disability affect you? Well, the ASD affects me mostly socially, I would say. or most noticeably socially. Then, I get trouble with this is one of the problems I get. I call it mind wipe. It's when I'm talking and my mind just goes blank. That can be quite inconvenient. But yeah, I get like executive functioning issues as well. But and also some pathological demand avoidance, which is even when you really want to do something, you feel that you can't, and that can also be classed, in my case, as task initiation issues. But the most prominent, I think, that other people would notice would be the social difficulties that I have. I find it difficult to be in certain social situations, particularly ones that I'm not used to being in. I have to be prepared for them, sometimes quite extensively, psychologically and emotionally. Even things like using the phone would be counted under that, I would say. What else? I think let's have a look what I've written here. Yeah, so following on from that, relationships are difficult, particularly romantic relationships. I've never had a romantic relationship, really. What I would describe as a romantic relationship. Aside from that, yeah, but I mean, even friendships can be difficult at times because of how I am. Before I knew that I was autistic, I lost friends, either permanently or for periods of time because of it, which kind of sucked. In terms of sensory symptoms, if you will, I do get some. I can't always anticipate them, but certain smells, tastes, touch. I don't like things touching my head, for example, apart from a hat. Strangely, I don't mind shaving my own head. Some people with ASD have a problem with that. I do not, so that's kind of cool, given that I'm going quite bald. But, yeah, so there's that. Let's see what else. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, and what led me to get a diagnosis really, was when I was seeing a neurologist for my physical disability, because they do think it's a neurological movement disorder that I've got, physical disability that I've got. I mentioned it to him because I've always felt like I'm an unusual person, but it's more than that. It's kind of hard to define, or at least it was then. And well, no, it still is, because just because you've got a name for something, that doesn't mean that you can necessarily describe how that thing feels. But he said, so it's an awareness, and I couldn't have put it better myself, if you will. That was the perfect way to say it, because that's what it was. It's an awareness that something isn't quite usual. I wouldn't say there's something wrong, but it's not quite usual, put it that way. Now, I know it's not as bad as, well, bad. I'm not affected as profoundly as some people can be by ASD. But I don't consider it a disability, certainly not in my case. I mean, I have met people who have autism who I would describe as disabled. I am not one of those people, and I say I would describe them as disabled. Would I describe them that way? I don't know if I would describe them to others as disabled, as in saying, oh, so-and-so is disabled. I might say that so-and-so was autistic, but I wouldn't necessarily say they were disabled because it depends on so many factors. And people don't see themselves as disabled a lot of the time. If they've gotten into a situation where they can, live their life with whatever conditions they've got, then it's a different kind of abled. Differently abled is a word I've heard used to describe it, which is one I don't necessarily agree with, but I think it's as good a term as any for a lot of people with ASD and neurodivergent conditions. ADHD, for example, would be another one of those, or AUDHD, which combines the symptoms of autism and ADHD a little bit. But yes, the one thing I would say is that I can't hide it now. Now that I'm aware of what it was all this time and what it continues to be, it's like taking a mattress out of vacuum packaging. It sort of goes blah everywhere. I can't avoid it. So in one way it's a shorthand. I know what this is. This is because of this. And, I'll usually look something up to make sure, something like that. Check on experiences other people have had. And more often than not, yes, that's the case. So there's that as well to be considered, and it still catches me out, as it does a lot of people, and it probably always will. I would imagine it's a lifelong process of learning, how to live the same as everybody else's life is, in that respect. What else have I got here? Oh yeah, I think autism, although it isn't necessarily a disability in and of itself, it can make you more prone to certain disabilities, like certain other types of neurodivergence, such as ADHD, and also things like savantism, but that's actually quite rare, even within the autistic community, as I understand it. And, people can also have profound problems with communication and things like that. But while that could be described as more of a disability, I think autism provides the framework for that disability. I don't think autism is necessarily a disability in and of itself, if that makes sense. One such disability that it can make you more prone to, and not least because if one is diagnosed later in life, like I was 42. It was about 5 years ago, just at the start of the pandemic. I have clinical depression. Now, this isn't, as I say, that's not a consequence of being autistic. It may be a consequence of being undiagnosed for the majority of my life thus far, but also it's in my family, depression, and it's something I've been prone to all my life. Also, how does it affect me was the question. Yeah, how does it affect you? Pretty much as you would expect. It would be low moods, low levels of enthusiasm, engagement, or interest in certain topics. Again, with again, similar in some ways to aspects of ASD. I think there is an app, what do they call it? Like a spillover. What do they call it? An overlap, in my case, between the two. As well as, which is more the ASD thing, I like routine. So that's another way the ASD affects me. But I'm sorry, I'm going to go round the houses a little bit here, because that's how my brain works. But yeah, you probably heard that autistic people like routine. Certainly in my case, that's correct. So that's another way in which ASD affects me. But the clinical depression is low mood, low interest in certain things. And of course, I take medication for the depression. I take 40 milligrams of fluoxetine on a daily basis, Prozac, which has got something of a name because it's got fluoride in it, but it's, if you actually look at the pharmacology of it, it's mainly used as a binding agent, so it passes through your body whole, so the fluoride doesn't really harm you in any way. So that's good. It just helps it to bind to various receptors in the brain. So yeah, that's how it affects me. The clinical depression, low mood, low energy as well, low enthusiasm. I have to take pills. And if I have a bad day, everybody gets bad days, but maybe my bad days might be slightly different or slightly worse than somebody that doesn't have clinical depression, but that's for them to say, not for me. In terms of my physical disability, I wake up every morning pretty much in pain. My legs are usually aching. Pretty much my whole body is aching when I get up. Quite stiff. I have a job to straighten my legs. They usually shake when I try to straighten them. I find it difficult to stand up off my bed and get dressed and etc., etc. And when I go out, I use crutches, or if I'm going out for a particularly long time, then I will use, or at least take, a wheelchair with me on many occasions. Not always. I mean, if I go to a supermarket or something, they usually have wheelchairs there that you can use. But if I'm going on a long journey, I often will take a wheelchair if that's possible. Of course, with public transport, that's not always possible, unfortunately, in this country, but I think that's a discussion for either a question later on or another video. Yeah, so I've got deformities in both feet. It's a cavovarus deformity, bilateral cavovarus deformity, which means that I've got unusually high arches and twisted heels. The heels kind of twist to compensate for that. And my big toes don't touch the floor. That side of my foot doesn't really engage with the floor when I walk, as it should. But I'm getting some shoes made for me at the moment on the NHS, which may or may not help with that. I think they will. I tried them on recently, and they seem to be... that seems like it will be a good thing. And again, similar to the depression, you get waves of functionality because moving at all is difficult. It takes more energy. It takes a certain amount of thought. Often I've got to think how I'm sitting often so that my feet don't go dead, or my right foot tends to get jammed if I sit cross-legged, things like that. Yeah, so that's that. My arms and shoulders and neck are affected as well. Not to as great an extent, but I've got arthritis in the top of my spine, the cervical area of the spine, a condition called spondylitis. I've also got these, I don't know what they're deposits of. I can't remember whether it's calcium or uric acid or what, because I have had gout in the past. But I get these build-ups which leave lumps on some of my joints, like my left knee is quite affected by that, and my right elbow. Had an operation on that last year to remove what the surgeons rather kindly referred to as Tophi Island. Tophi are the name of the little deposits. But I had quite a large bursitis on that elbow that was removed, and one of the surgeons said he hadn't seen anything like it before surgically, so must have been quite impressive. Would have liked to have seen it myself, actually, but didn't have that opportunity on that occasion. What else? Yeah, as I say, I can usually get around the house most of the time. Without taking pain medication, I try and avoid pain medication because a lot of it has quite unpleasant side effects, and I get them all for some reason. Maybe that's to do with the autism as well, because we can be prone to that, and also I can get some effects that aren't even listed, and sometimes they don't work. Sometimes though I can't get out of bed at all, and I will take something stronger, some strong painkillers then, like naproxen or an opiate like codeine, for example, or maybe something here called Zapane, which is a mix of paracetamol and codeine with a high codeine content, and again, the efficacy of that is a little bit hit and miss, so I don't know why that is. Also, some of the medications I've taken for the neurological conditions they think I've had have had unpleasant side effects as well, like the DRD medication. It was called Madapar, is levodopa, which is a precursor to dopamine, and it made me suicidal. Now, why I was prescribed it, I'm not entirely sure. It's a medication designed for people with Parkinson's, often. That's the main use. And also yes, made for people with Parkinson's, that one. And I've also tried baclofen, which I believe is a form of a muscle relaxant to deal with spasticity, and that didn't work. It made me exhausted, and I felt very drugged, and I had quite a serious rash with that. So I was advised to start taking that. Tried Botox as well, so that didn't work. And I had one of the rarer side effects of that, which is it weakens the muscles, which is its job, but it usually confers some kind of clinical benefit in doing that. And in my case, there was no clinical benefit. So I haven't had a lot of luck with medications, unfortunately. So that is how the disabilities I have affect me. That was quite a long one. Okay, question 3. This one won't be as long, thankfully. How and when were you diagnosed? As I said earlier, I was diagnosed with ASD 5 years ago. I was 42 years old. The diagnosis came just before the pandemic hit, and there were these little courses that you can do to not so much help you integrate, but to assimilate the information regarding your diagnosis, and I wasn't able to do those because of the pandemic. So that was an experience I didn't have, which may or may not have helped in the early days, if you will, after I was diagnosed, because I had some questions that were left unanswered, but I've kind of got a hold of it now myself, doing the work I've done myself. So there's that. As for how I was diagnosed, that was when I was diagnosed. As for how I was diagnosed, it was when I was, as I say, when I was having neurological appointments for the physical disability. I brought it up, and he said, "Okay, I'll get you an assessment." So it was my neurologist and my GP who got me an assessment at an assessment clinic in Newport, near where I live. Yeah, as far as depression goes, I was diagnosed around 2000 the number 2004 is in my head. I think it was slightly earlier than that, but I was working for Oxfam at the time, and I know that was just before that. So around about 2003, 2004, I felt absolutely terrible and went to the doctors and got diagnosed with depression, and got prescribed fluoxetine, which I still take to this day, and it's very useful. I've tried to come off it more than once, but my depression is such that I function better, shall we say, on it than not. In terms of my physical disability, again, I haven't got a diagnosis for that yet. As I say, they've tried a number of diagnoses. After genetic testing, it doesn't seem I've got anything that they think I've had thus far. But there will be more testing coming up, so they may be able to give me a diagnosis in the coming year, 2026, which would be good it would be good to know what it is, even if they can't do anything about it, for reasons of identity. Now, I'm not one that requires a label, but I think in medicine, until you get the right label, they don't know where to put you. So it's hard to get the needs of your condition recognized. Right, so that's question 3. Question 4. What has your disability taught you, rather? ASD has taught me that it's not in my head, that I am unusual, that normality is a wide, a broad church. I wouldn't describe myself as abnormal, but I would say that I was unusual. And I'm cool with that. I feel that one can be unusual without being a freak or being necessarily weird in any way. I do consider myself a little bit weird in some ways, but then I think a lot of people are. So, I'm fine with that. In terms of the depression, I think it's taught me to, just because you're having a bad day or something like that, and I don't want to make light of having a bad day. I know how bad a bad day can be, and they can be far worse than anything I've ever experienced, I can assure you. It doesn't mean that there won't be a light side, either the next day or at some point in the future. Something I like to say is you only have to live every day once, because tomorrow, by definition, will be different, at least in some ways. So I think, and also it's made me all my disabilities that I've got have made me realise that I'm a tough son of a bitch, pretty much. I can put up with a lot more than perhaps I thought I could before I was subject to various disabilities. The physical disability, what has that taught me? Probably to value your physical health. I would think is the biggest thing that the physical disabilities has taught me. And don't take physical health for granted, because it may not always be what you think. You don't know what the future is, so it may catch you out. So always be glad that you can do things when you can do them. How do disabilities affect your planning? ASD affects my planning in terms of routine, I guess. I'd like to do things in a certain order, not necessarily at certain times, but in a certain order and in a certain way. Again, that's almost a characteristic of autism in the minds of many people at this point. I don't know if that's true in reality, but it is in my case. And also, if I go to a social event, for example, I will have to plan that psychologically and emotionally more extensively than people may have to if they're not autistic. One thing that used to help with that is alcohol. I drank very heavily for 20 years to deal with it in social situations. But I haven't drunk now for 10 years, and I still seem to be able to handle things well. So it's just different. You just gotta take a different approach, I guess, basically. In terms of how clinical depression has helped me, how I have to plan things with clinical depression, I have to have my medication with me if I go somewhere overnight. I have to plan to take that medication because that doesn't always happen. And yeah, I think a lot of the planning with depression has a certain amount in common with the planning for ASD in terms of planning how I'm going to be and taking into account things like masking and things like that. Yeah, so that's how clinical depression affects planning. The physical disability, it's good to know quite early on if I'm going to need to go somewhere that is going to require a lot of walking, because I either won't be able to do it at all, or I will have to take a wheelchair, or at least I may have to. This is particularly problematic on things like trains. Taking the train down to London, I've taken it, the train to London a couple of times now, there and back, and that's been incredibly difficult because I haven't been able to use a wheelchair for that. Although provision does exist, it's a complex. The arrangements surrounding that are quite complex, and I haven't really been able to make them work. Fortunately, the next time I go to London to the hospital, I may be able to get NHS transport, so that might be, that might help with that. Well, it would help with it if that happens, which I hope that it does. Question 6. What would be one piece of advice I could give myself about living with disability? That you will have bad days, but you'll have good ones as well. That you are unusual, but you are in no way a freak, and you can keep your head up in the world, and you should. I think that's important. And also with the physical stuff, what has it taught me? Is that the question? No, a piece of advice. What advice would I give myself about the physical disability? Just go slow and don't be too proud to ask for help, because people will help you. If they can see you in genuine difficulty, there are a lot of people that will help you, and one should be open to that rather than becoming aggressive, which I have done in the past, unfortunately, but I did learn from that experience. Okay, question 7. Talk about 3 disabled YouTubers you enjoy watching. Honestly, I don't watch that many disabled YouTubers. The ones I do watch haven't posted for a while. I'm actually going to name 4 because I actually follow 4. Well, actually, I follow a couple more than that, but the most prominent ones that come to mind are a lady called M. Quattrocci, who, E.M. Quattrocci, who is, I believe, from Australia or New Zealand. I can't remember which. But she's wheelchair bound, I believe, due to a car incident. I don't know what that incident was, or, well, I can kind of remember something about it, but I don't want to say in case it's wrong, and it's not my place to anyway, so. That's one. Another lady is, I think her name is pronounced Carmezi. She's a lady that has cerebral palsy that I started watching when I thought I might have cerebral palsy. It turns out I didn't, or they don't think I have, because I don't have. Although I've got some of the physical symptoms, there are some other symptoms that I don't have. Not that everybody has the same symptom profile, but apparently that was, I should consider that last on the list, if you will. So there's those 2, neither of whom have posted for a while, so I hope they're both doing well. Then there's Indie Andy, who I got the tag from. I don't know a huge amount about him yet. I've only recently subscribed to his channel, but I will hopefully be remedying that shortly. And also there's another lady called Ginger Snaspy, I think is how you pronounce her name, who is a filmmaker. She also has ASD, and she's a filmmaker. She made a rather good documentary about ASD some time ago, which was on her channel. I don't know if it still is. I haven't been there for quite some time because she hasn't posted recently. So, again, I hope she's well. Right. Yeah, there are a few other people who I follow who may, in general, be classed as disabled to some extent. However, I'm not going to mention those people because I don't know if they consider themselves to be disabled, and even if they do, I don't know if they would want me to speak about them in that context. So, and that's people I'm closer to than the 4 people I've mentioned, but yeah, that's why I haven't mentioned those people. In my judgment, I don't think it's right to mention that somebody is disabled if you don't know whether they consider themselves disabled. So we'll leave that there, I think. And finally, tag 4 disabled people to do the tag. Now, I'm not going to do this for a couple of reasons. First, the tag is quite old, so I don't know if anybody would want to do it. Also, yeah, the tag is quite old, so I don't know if anybody would want to do it. But also, I'm not in the disabled YouTube niche. I don't make a lot of videos about my disabilities. It's because although they are a big part of my life, they're not my whole life. I've got a life in spite of them in some ways, and I'd rather focus on that to a large extent. But yes, I wouldn't want to tag anybody within that community because I'm not part of that community, and I don't know how they would feel about somebody from outside that community tagging them. Whether that's frowned upon or whatever. So, you know, the journey people go through with disabilities is so personal that I wouldn't want to take any sort of a liberty like that on my part. However, I think anybody who wants to do this tag, who sees this tag and thinks, oh, you know, I'd be interested in doing that, they should be allowed to do it. I don't think limiting it to 4 is necessarily a good thing. I know they had to come up with a number. 4 is a reasonable number, but I think it's better to leave it open to everybody. And yeah, if anybody wants to mention me or tag me in it, if they do it, then please feel free to do so, or to say that they've got the tag after seeing this video. Then that's fine on their part. I'd be happy with that. I would, you know, be interested in speaking to people who've got like experience, shall we say, be that long-term disability or a more shorter-term thing that they've been going through. Okay, well, this video is incredibly long compared to what I thought it was going to be. Yeah, okay, so I mean, that's all the questions. I've nothing really to add apart from thank you for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. You're a bit of a trooper if you did, I think. It's the best part of 50 minutes long so far. It was an interesting tag to do, to let people know perhaps a little bit more about that side of my life and my personality and the face behind the channel, if you will. And cheers for watching, and as always, please like, share, comment, and please subscribe so that you can watch the content I've done already and can watch what I'm going to be doing in the future. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and stay safe, and I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.